When I was 17, my parents tossed my suitcase onto the front porch like trash. My mother smirked, "You'll be back begging in a month." My father slammed the door before I could even look back. They thought they had broken me. But 10 years later, the phone rang, and on the other end was my mother, her voice trembling, begging me for money to save the very house they kicked me out of. And for the first time in my life, I held the power. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone told you that you weren't good enough, then you're going to love this story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready, because this isn't just a revenge story. It's about survival, transformation, and the sweetest justice life can hand you. My name is Danielle Hart, and when I was 17, I learned what it felt like to be disposable. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of ordinary night you don't expect to turn into a permanent scar. I came home from school with my sketchbook pressed to my chest, graphite smudges on my fingertips, hope thrumming in my veins. That day I had received something I thought would change everything, an acceptance letter into a prestigious art program out of state. It wasn't Harvard, it wasn't Yale, it wasn't the medical track my parents had carved out for me since I was old enough to hold a pencil, but it was mine. When I slid the envelope across the dinner table, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see the light in my eyes and understand. My father barely looked at the paper. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch. My mother, perfectly composed with her lipstick never smudged, let out a laugh so sharp it sliced through my excitement like glass. "You think you're going to waste your life painting?" my father asked, voice like thunder behind storm clouds. I tried to explain, about graphic design, animation, the real-world careers that creativity could open up. I spoke fast, desperate, as if the right string of words could untie the noose tightening around my throat. But my mother smirked, leaning back in her chair. "You'll be back here in a month," she said, her tone dripping with cruel certainty. "Begging. Because no one wants a starving artist for a daughter." Her words burned deeper than any insult I had ever heard. They weren't just dismissing my dream, they were dismissing me. The argument escalated fast, voices overlapping, my pulse hammering in my ears. My father stood so suddenly his chair screeched across the tile. He stormed into my room, yanked my duffel bag from the closet, and began tossing my clothes inside like I was nothing more than clutter to be cleared. My mother followed, sweeping my sketchbook off the desk and dropping it on top of the mess with a sneer. "Out," my father said flatly. "If you won't follow our rules, you won't live under our roof." For a moment, I thought he was bluffing. That this was some kind of scare tactic. But then he dragged the bag to the front door, shoved it across the threshold, and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize, cold, final, unyielding. I stood frozen on the porch, the evening chill seeping through my sneakers. My suitcase sat at my feet, the zipper barely holding shut. My sketchbook felt like the only part of me worth clinging to. And then came the sound that would echo in my memory for years, the slam of the door, followed by the metallic click of the lock. Just like that, I was 17. Homeless. Disowned for wanting to chase a dream. That night, I slept on my best friend Lila's couch. Her mother made space for me, though I saw the strain in her tired eyes every time groceries stretched thinner. I told myself it was temporary, that my parents would come to their senses, that this exile would last a week at most. But the weeks turned into months. The silence from my parents was louder than any words. I found a shoebox-sized studio apartment with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's alarm clock buzz every morning. The rent devoured my coffee shop wages, but it was mine. At night, I painted by the weak glow of a desk lamp, sometimes nodding off mid-stroke, waking with charcoal dust smeared across my cheek. I cried more nights than I'd admit to anyone. Not because I doubted my art, but because I could still hear my mother's smirk in her voice, still see the dismissal in my father's eyes. Every insult replayed like a cruel recording, "You'll be back begging in a month." And maybe some nights, I almost believed her. But pride is a strange, stubborn thing. Every time I thought about crawling back, the thought of her satisfied smile burned hotter than hunger. I would rather starve than let them be right. So I pushed forward. I worked double shifts, took every commission I could find, sold sketches online for prices that barely covered bus fare. But every small win, every stranger who paid me for a piece of my art, was proof that I wasn't nothing. That I wasn't a mistake. And though I didn't know it then, every smudge of charcoal on my fingers, every crumpled dollar bill earned from art, was a stone in the foundation of something far bigger than my parents ever believed I could build. Because one day, the tables would turn. The first few years after being thrown out weren't a triumphant climb, they were survival. I balanced 3 jobs at once, barista by day, waitress by night, and on weekends I worked at a tiny art supply store where I inhaled the smell of paper and paint as if it could keep me alive. Rent devoured nearly everything I earned. Some months, dinner was instant noodles 5 nights in a row. But even in those nights of exhaustion, art never left me. I would drag myself home, peel off an apron still smelling of burnt coffee, and set up my sketchbook on that chipped desk. Some nights I painted until dawn, my eyelids heavy but my heart strangely full. There was a quiet defiance in every stroke of the brush. I wasn't just making art, I was proving to myself that my parents were wrong. Still, the road was brutal. Rejection emails piled up. "Thank you for your submission, but," became the sentence I dreaded most. Each no was like a fresh echo of my mother's laughter. But one night, scrolling through freelance boards with bleary eyes, I landed a small commission, $50 for a logo design for a local bakery. It wasn't much, but when the owner gushed about how my design captured her vision, I felt something shift inside me. My art wasn't just decoration. It had value. That job led to another. And then another. Soon I was designing menus, posters, even websites for small businesses. Word of mouth carried my name further than I expected. By the time I turned 21, my portfolio looked real. I wasn't just a girl who liked to draw anymore, I was a designer. A creator. Someone clients depended on. I still remember my first major breakthrough. A tech startup hired me to craft their branding. It was a risky gig, the kind of opportunity that could go unnoticed or blow up big. I poured myself into it, sketching, revising, obsessing over details until my eyes burned. When the campaign launched, it went viral. My designs were splashed across social media, billboards, everywhere. And suddenly, people wanted to know who was behind the art. Emails flooded my inbox. Job offers, contracts, collaborations. I moved out of the shoebox apartment and into a space with tall windows and real light. I bought proper supplies, invested in myself, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was treading water. But here's the thing, no matter how far I climbed, the memory of that porch haunted me. I could still feel the sting of cold air on my skin, the weight of that duffel bag, the sound of the lock clicking. My parents believed I would come crawling back within a month. And yet, year after year passed without a word from them. I built a name for myself, brick by brick, while they faded into the background of my life. At least, until the phone rang. And on the other end, I heard my mother's voice trembling for the very first time. I still remember the exact moment the past clawed its way back into my life. It was late evening. I had just finished a video call with a client in London, sipping tea while my latest painting dried in the corner. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something in me clicked accept. "Danielle?" The voice was faint, trembling, but unmistakable. My mother. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 10 years of silence, and suddenly she was on the line as if no time had passed. She tried to sound casual at first, asking about me, her tone brittle and forced. But I could hear it, the panic under her words. And then, the truth spilled out. They were in trouble. My father had made reckless investments. The house they had always bragged about, the same house where they slammed the door in my face, was about to be foreclosed. Their savings were drained, and creditors were circling. And they needed me. I almost laughed, the irony was so sharp it could cut. 10 years earlier, they tossed me out with nothing but a duffel bag and a sketchbook. Now, they were reaching out to the very daughter they swore would come crawling back. But I didn't laugh. I listened. I let her explain, her voice breaking, desperation bleeding through every syllable. "We just need a little help," she whispered. "You've done so well for yourself, haven't you? We're proud of you. You could save us." Those words, "we're proud of you," hit me like poison disguised as honey. Proud? They hadn't even been there to see me become who I was. They hadn't called once when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, or scraping coins together for groceries, or crying over rejection after rejection. Now they were proud because they needed something. My chest tightened with a storm of emotions: anger, sorrow, disbelief. But beneath it all was something sharper: power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the begging child. They were. "I'll think about it," I said coolly, my voice steadier than I felt. We ended the call, and I just sat there, staring at the city lights beyond my window. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with adrenaline. This was the moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. And yet, it was more complicated than I imagined. Part of me still longed for their approval, still wanted to hear them admit they were wrong. But another part of me, the stronger part, wanted justice. They had left me on that porch at 17, convinced I would come crawling back. And now, 10 years later, the roles were reversed. For once, I held the choice. And I wasn't going to waste it. The following week, I drove back to the town I swore I'd never set foot in again. The streets looked smaller, almost shrunken, like they'd aged along with the people who lived there. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the same one I'd been kicked out of 10 years earlier, the irony wasn't lost on me. The place looked different now. The paint was chipped, the yard overgrown, windows streaked with grime. It no longer radiated pride or perfection, it reeked of neglect and desperation. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. Her smile was strained, her once carefully curated elegance faded. My father stood behind her, shoulders sagging, eyes bloodshot. For the first time in my life, they didn't look like untouchable figures towering above me. They looked small. "Danielle," my mother said, her voice shaky but coated in sugar. "It's so good to see you. We've missed you." I stepped inside, letting the silence stretch as I looked around. The same hallway where they once screamed at me, the same floor where my suitcase had been dragged out. My chest tightened with memory, but I kept my expression neutral. They launched into their story almost immediately. Bad investments. Mounting debt. The looming foreclosure. My father tried to justify it with technical words, my mother with tears. They painted themselves as victims of cruel circumstance, not the architects of their own downfall. And then came the request. "We just need a loan," my father said finally, his voice almost pleading. "Enough to buy us time. We know you've done well. This could save the family home." I looked at them, really looked at them. The people who had once smirked as they cast me out now sat across from me begging for scraps. "Do you remember," I asked slowly, "what you said to me the night you kicked me out?" My mother blinked, caught off guard. "Danielle, that was years ago." "You said I'd be back begging in a month," I cut in, my voice sharp. "You laughed while Dad shoved my clothes into a bag. You slammed the door in my face like I was nothing. Do you remember that?" The color drained from her cheeks. My father shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the silence. Funny, isn't it? 10 years later, and here you are. Sitting in front of me. Begging. Their faces tightened with shame. My mother tried again, voice trembling. "We're still your parents. Surely you can find it in your heart." "No." The word was simple. Final. I stood, grabbing my bag. "You threw me away because I didn't fit your mold. You wanted a doctor, not a daughter. You told me I'd never make it. Well, I did. And now you're paying the price for how little you believed in me." I walked to the door, pausing just long enough to twist the knife. "You told me I'd come crawling back. But the truth is, you're the ones crawling now. And I don't owe you a thing. Their silence followed me out the door, heavy and hollow. And for the first time since I was 17, I felt free. Driving away from that house, I expected to feel guilt. After all, these were my parents, the people who gave me life. But as the miles stretched between us, what I felt wasn't guilt. It was relief. For 10 years, I had carried the weight of their rejection on my shoulders like chains. Every sleepless night in that shoebox apartment, every time I skipped meals to buy supplies, every cruel echo of my mother's smirk, they had shaped me. They thought they'd broken me, but in truth, they forged me into someone stronger than they could ever imagine. And when the moment finally came, when they needed me the way I once needed them, I realized something powerful: revenge isn't always about destroying someone else. Sometimes, it's about refusing to let them destroy you. I didn't give them money. I didn't save the house. A few months later, it went into foreclosure. I heard from an old neighbor that they moved into a cramped rental on the other side of town. And while a part of me pitied them, a bigger part of me knew they were living out the consequences of choices they had made, not me. As for me, my art wasn't just survival anymore. It was thriving. I opened my own design studio, employed a team of artists, and helped other young creatives who'd been told their dreams weren't real jobs. I made sure no one else had to feel the way I once did, alone, dismissed, unwanted. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the people who laugh at your dreams are usually the ones too afraid to chase their own. And sometimes, life has a way of flipping the script. The ones who said you'd fail end up at your doorstep, begging for the very help they swore you'd never have the power to give. So if you've ever been underestimated, if someone's ever told you that you weren't good enough, remember this: you don't need their validation to succeed. You just need the courage to keep going, even when it feels impossible. And one day, when the tables finally turn, you'll realize the sweetest revenge isn't about payback, it's about becoming everything they swore you couldn't be. They kicked me out thinking I'd crawl back. Instead, I built a life they could never touch. In the end, revenge wasn't about punishing them, it was about proving them wrong by living well. And that's a victory no one can take away. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe for more powerful revenge stories. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? I'll be reading them all. Until next time, stay strong, and never stop believing in yourself.